Oh, you joined me. Hold on a sec. Let me get the light. There we go. Yes, I was just sitting here in the dark, waiting. Not creepy at all. Glad you made it. Take a few seconds to get comfy and maybe grab your favorite John Stamos body pillow and assume the big spoon position. How about we put a little burning fireplace in that bottom right corner for some ambient noise? Fireplace, please. Guys, the fireplace. There it is, splendid. Hard to find good help these days. Wait, that is much too large. Smaller, please, and in the corner. Good. Now how about some embers? Embers, please. Very good. Looks like we are all set for this monumental journey now. But first, if you would not mind liking and subscribing. It really helps us out more than you know. And drop a comment on what country you reside in, as we are always curious on where our viewers are from. Now, let's begin. And tonight we're throwing ourselves headfirst into the ancient world. To a place where gods walked the earth, the sun didn't believe in mercy, and every meal came with a side of sand. That's right. We're talking about ancient Egypt. And prepare to have all your romantic ideas of ancient Egypt melted into a sweaty puddle. The day starts with heat, not just warmth, heat. The kind that punches through your reed hut walls like a divine spotlight aimed directly at your forehead. No glass windows, no shades, no curtains. Just the full fury of the Egyptian sun, unfiltered and extremely opinionated. You wake up on a straw mat. Your sheet, if you even have one, is linen, but calling it a sheet is generous. It's more like a whisper of fabric. Whatever breeze the travel brochures promised has apparently died sometime around 2800 BC. By the time you shuffle outside, the temperature is already racing toward 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's not even breakfast time. You step out into a world of brightness and dust, where your linen tunic is about as helpful as a napkin in a furnace. It sticks, it scratches, it lets the sun through like it's made of regrets. So no, there's no sunscreen, no SPF 50, no coconut-scented aloe. Ancient Egyptians had protective oils, but unless you're high-ranking or hanging out in temple circles, you're out of luck. You might get by smearing some river mud on yourself, or crocodile dung if you're feeling desperate. Some believed it helped. Some were probably just messing with the lower class. Midday hits, and the stones beneath your feet could double as a frying pan. Shade is a fantasy. Maybe you crouch next to a mud brick wall, but it's radiating heat like it's holding a grudge. You look like bread dough someone left outside too long. But remember, you can't complain. The sun isn't just hot, it's divine. The god Ra rides across the sky watching everything. And if you're melting into your sandals, it just means he's having a great day. Now that you're crispy and conscious, it's time for your morning routine, which involves a walk to the Nile. This, of course, is your local spa, your sacred water source, your communal bathtub, and your washing machine. All rolled into one, plus frogs. As you approach the river, you're hit with its scent, a mix of swamp, wet dog, and something fishy that got philosophical about its place in the food chain. But there it is, the mighty Nile, source of life, and weirdly, source of skincare. Soap doesn't exist yet, so what do? You exfoliate the ancient way by scrubbing yourself with sand, trilly. Just rub coarse grains all over and call it natural. It doesn't clean you so much as it rearranges your outer layer. If you're doing laundry, you dunk your tunics in the river and slap them against rocks while trying not to attract attention from anything with teeth. And remember, this river isn't just used for bathing, it's also got bits of livestock, human waste, and possibly a funeral barge drifting by. Still, it's sacred. You work with what you've got. Public bathhouses only in big cities. And privacy? Hilarious. You're washing alongside your neighbours, their goats, some toddlers, and a bird that's definitely making eye contact with you. Water jars are filled, balanced on heads, and carried home before the clay floor bakes into solid toast. This is normal. It's ritual. It's slightly traumatic. But that's just Tuesday. Now that you're technically clean and smell slightly better than before, it's time for the most important meal of the day. Strategic fuel loading, or what we call breakfast. You don't sit down at a table, you squat. Or maybe you hunch over on a stone block if you're feeling bougie. The main dish? Bread. Heavy, dense, and probably full of sand. And no, that's not seasoning. It's just what happens when your flour is ground between two big rocks. Crunchy minerals are just part of the deal. Then comes the beer. But don't get too excited. This isn't bubbly lager. It's thick, warm, fermented grain soup. It's less refreshing beverage and more drinkable porridge. Still, it's calorie dense and safer than Nile water, so even kids drink it. On a good day, you get an onion, maybe a date. If someone caught a fish, you might get a bite, assuming the guy didn't just eat it raw on the spot. Protein is rare. Flies circle like it's their personal brunch buffet. You swat with one hand, grip your cup with the other, and try not to inhale anything you didn't ask for. If you're not royalty, a scribe, or in the priesthood, your day job is brutal. It starts at dawn and doesn't care if your feet hurt, if you slept wrong, or if Ra is cooking your organs. The sun is your manager. If you're a farmer, you're knee-deep in Nile mud by sunrise, yanking up weeds while an overseer screams encouragement. Your tools are wooden, your hands are bare, and if your back aches, congratulations, that means you're doing it right. Laborer? Worse. Try dragging massive stone blocks up makeshift ramps under a sky that wants to kill you. There are no boots, no gloves, no union. You trip. That's a broken ankle and a shrug from the guy next to you. If you work on a pharaoh's tomb, the stakes go up. One mistake, and you might end up sealed in with the job. Literally. And if you're a woman, you're not off the hook. You're grinding grain, hauling water, weaving linen, watching kids, tending animals, helping in the fields, and cooking. Your break is when the baby naps for 11 minutes, and you can cry in the corner in peace. Dinner? You eat standing up while stirring a pot with one hand and shooing away a goat with the other. You don't stop. If you slow down, you fall behind. And if you fall behind, your quota doesn't get met. And someone else eats your rations while you take the blame. The sun sets, but that doesn't mean you're done. It just means you can collapse in a dusty pile and dream of shade and bread without rocks in it. Work here isn't hard, it's endless. Speak out of turn and you could get whipped, shackled, or launched into the afterlife early, without your favorite amulets. His face is on statues, coins, murals, even your bread mold. And no, you'll never meet him. If you're lucky, you might glimpse his golden boat float by once during a festival. So yes, the pharaoh is divine. And you? You're just lucky to sweat in his name. If you thought the scorching sun and punishing labor were the worst of it, welcome to the part of the day where things get truly exhausting: religion. In ancient Egypt, faith isn't just a weekend activity. It's the operating system for your entire existence. Every step, every meal, every cough has a god attached to it. You wake up and thank Ra, you spill your beer and mumble an apology to Hathor. You stub your toe and you better keep that curse to yourself or risk summoning a ghost with unresolved issues. Your town has a whole roster of deities. Ra, obviously a Mr. Sun himself. Thoth, the one with the bird head, manages scribes and moon calendars. Sobek, part crocodile and all nightmare, watches over the Nile. Bastet, the cat goddess, handles everything from fertility to pest control and PR. Basically, your job is to keep the gods happy, because if they're unhappy, your house might catch fire or your cow might start walking backward. Before you eat, you offer a bite to the gods. Before bed, you pray that Set, the god of chaos, doesn't throw your life into a flaming pit overnight. Even funerals are multi-day marathons. They're with the deceased passing tests, dodging demons and proving moral worth before they're allowed to move on. Death? That's just the job interview for eternity. Then comes the main event, the heart test. They weigh your heart against a feather. Yes, a literal feather. Symbol of truth and balance. If your heart's heavier, you've failed. Why? Because heavy hearts are full of guilt and misdeeds. The punishment? You don't get sent to hell, you get erased. A creature named Amit, part crocodile, part lion, part hippo, all terrifying, eats your soul, and that's it. You don't get reincarnated, you don't haunt anyone, you just stop existing. But if you pass, congratulations. You move on to the field of reeds, the Egyptian version of paradise. It's like a dream version of the Nile, with perfect crops, eternal sunshine, and no taxes. You get your own boat, maybe even your dog back, and hopefully fewer sand fleas. Of course, the richer you are, the smoother that journey. The wealthy could afford proper tombs, mummification, scrolls full of spells, aka the Book of the Dead, and armies of tiny servant dolls called shabtis to do your chores in the afterlife. Think of them as spiritual interns with no lunch breaks. So yes, the afterlife is beautiful. If you followed every rule, said every prayer, and didn't accidentally offend a jackal-headed god in the middle of the night. Sleep tight, and if you're not dead yet, lucky you, you might still get sick. Maybe you stepped on something weird, or got bit by something weird, or caught something mysterious from the river, the air, or your cousin's sneeze. Welcome to ancient Egyptian medicine. Let's start with the good news. Egypt had some of the most advanced medicine in the ancient world. They had surgical tools, medical papyri, and a pretty solid grasp of anatomy. The bad news? It all came bundled with magic spells, amulets, and a generous helping of winging it. You've got a rash? Here's a poultice made from mouldy bread, honey, and crushed herbs. Surprisingly, it kind of works. Mold contains natural penicillin and honey is antibacterial. But first, the healer whispers a protective chant to ward off any lurking demons. Because obviously your rash might also be the fault of a vengeful spirit living inside your spleen. Headache? Time for onion paste rubbed into your scalp, paired with a hymn to the moon god. Chest pain? Try a salve of mashed dates, cow dung, and optimism. If it doesn't help, it at least smells distracting. Eye infection? Lizard blood, ochre, beer, and a prayer to Horus. Good luck. Need surgery? They'll drain abscesses, stitch wounds with linen thread, and reset broken bones. What they won't do is give you anesthesia. Your options are bite down on a stick, scream into a pillow made of clay, and hope the guy holding your shoulders down doesn't pass out first. Dentistry? Forget it. After years of eating bread full of sand, your teeth are worn down to nubs by your 20s. If one gets infected, your options are A. Ignore it, B. Die, or C. Have it yanked out with a tool forged by someone who also makes weapons. No matter what you're suffering from, you'll likely be sent home with a charm, a carved amulet to hang around your neck, just in case your liver cramps are being caused by a ghost snake coiled around your intestines. So yes, ancient Egyptian medicine was ahead of its time, but a big part of your prescription was still blind hope and religious backup. Now let's talk about women in ancient Egypt, because here's a twist most people don't see coming. They had more rights than women in much later societies. They could own land, run businesses, divorce their husbands, and even take a man to court. Sounds progressive, right? But before you go packing for your time-traveling girl boss vacation, remember this. Legal rights don't make daily life any easier. If you're a woman, your day starts before dawn. You grind grain by hand using a giant stone that slowly turns your spine into an S shape. Then it's water hauling, fire starting, animal feeding, baby wrangling, field working, cloth weaving, and dinner cooking. And don't forget laundry in a hippo-infested river. You're a one-woman workforce, wrapped in linen. Now, if you're born into wealth, things improve a bit. You might learn to read and write, manage estates, or even become a priestess if you're royalty. You could even rule the country. Hatshepsut did it, Cleopatra did it, and their eyeliner was legendary. But most women weren't queens, they were tired. Legally independent, yes, but still living in a world where survival meant constant motion, constant work, and constantly hoping the gods were in a good mood. Still, Egyptian women had a voice, they had property, they had legal rights, which in an ancient world filled with societies that treated women as furniture with wombs was revolutionary. But comfort? Comfort was for the statues. You've made it through the dust, the heat, the gods, the bugs, the grit-flavored beer, and maybe even childbirth. Now you're wondering, what happens after all this? What's waiting for you when you finally kick the papyrus bucket? Well, welcome to the afterlife. Or not. Because in ancient Egypt, death wasn't a finish line, it was just the beginning of a new set of exhausting paperwork. Your soul still has to prove itself. You've got to pass a moral quiz, avoid demon lawsuits, and earn the right to not be erased from existence. So your body, if you're lucky, gets carefully embalmed, salted, wrapped up like a human burrito, and tucked into a sarcophagus. That's just the beginning. You're also buried with food, perfumes, furniture, jewelry, tiny statues meant to do chores for you in the next world, and hopefully a complete copy of the Book of the Dead, a spiritual cheat sheet full of spells, passwords, and reminders like, don't insult the crocodile god. And if you were rich? Oh, it's an entire operation. Your tomb is designed like an eternal Airbnb for your soul, stocked with artwork, treasure, inscriptions, curses, and anything you might need to live large in the field of reeds. If you were poor, your body might be wrapped in an old cloth and buried in a shallow pit with a pot of barley and one heartfelt shrug. But here's the thing, just because you're dead doesn't mean you're safe. Tombs weren't just resting places, they were targets, filled with gold, amulets, tools, and sometimes literal boats. Tombs were basically ancient Egyptian vending machines for the desperate and morally flexible. Pharaohs tried to prevent this with curses on the walls, stuff like, may a serpent of fire twist your limbs for eternity, or crocodile eats your soul, no refunds. Didn't work. Grave robbers came anyway. Sometimes they were outsiders, sometimes temple guards, sometimes the very people who built the tombs. Everyone knew what was inside, and when famine hit, even a burial loaf of bread started looking like a pretty good snack. Even commoners' graves got looted. A tiny stash of beer or linen was better than nothing. Tools could be reused. And let's not lie, if you had to choose between sacred ceremony and keeping your child alive, you probably know where your chisel's going. Hieroglyphs weren't doodles. They were a fully functional writing system with over 700 characters. Some stood for sounds, some for ideas. Some were there to clarify meaning because, let's be honest, this wasn't the most efficient system. No punctuation, no vowels, just a never-ending stream of symbols that read in any direction the scribe felt like that day. Want to read it? Look at the way the little animals are facing. That tells you which way to go. Still confused? Join the club. Only about 1% of the population could read or write. If you wanted to be one of them, you had to become a scribe. And that meant years of school, memorizing every symbol, copying endless scrolls until your hand went numb and your sanity relocated to the underworld. But if you made it, you were golden. Scribes didn't haul stones, they didn't plough fields, they didn't live in constant fear of sand-induced tooth loss. They sat in the shade and wrote things down while everyone else sweat. Writing wasn't just a skill, it was power. To record someone's name was to preserve their soul. To erase it, that was a spiritual execution. No wonder kings and priests made sure their names were everywhere: stone, statues, coffins, bread molds. So, after all that, we ask the final question. Let's be brutally honest. You, with your filtered water, temperature-controlled living room, toothpaste, indoor plumbing, and the option to DoorDash a burrito at 2 a.m., you wouldn't make it past lunch. You'd be crushed by the sun, eaten alive by mosquitoes, sandpapered by your tunic. You'd collapse during grain grinding. Your stomach would declare mutiny after one gulp of chunky beer. And your anxiety would peak the moment you had to answer for your soul in front of 42 supernatural judges. But that's okay, because the people who did survive, they weren't just survivors, they were believers. They built pyramids with bare hands, mapped the stars without telescopes, worshipped gods who spoke through sandstorms and sunbeams. They lived short, hard, beautiful lives, full of music, family, festivals, dance, laughter, grief, hope, and a deep faith in something beyond this world. They carved their names into stone, confident they'd be remembered. And they were. So no, you probably wouldn't last a day, but they lasted thousands of years. The feathered serpent, that strange fusion of sky and soil, of wings and scales, didn't vanish when Teotihuacan did. He adapted. He was embraced by the Toltecs, and later, the Aztecs gave him a new name and a softer face, Quetzalcoatl, the god who brought wisdom, who cried for humanity, who promised he'd return. His story didn't disappear. It evolved. Because that's what myths do. They survive by changing shape. Even now, echoes of him linger in murals, poetry, national symbolism. His image has been stamped onto coins, carved into buildings, woven into the story of a country. The feathered serpent became more than a god. He became a symbol of mystery, of ancient brilliance, and of the untamable power that once surged through Mesoamerica. But there's another legacy, and a harder one. This temple forces us to ask uncomfortable questions. What price are we willing to pay to feel close to something divine? How much are we prepared to give or take in the name of belief? Because this place wasn't just a sanctuary, it was a stage for sacrifice, a structure of staggering beauty built on bones and blood. It's not just a ruin, it's a mirror. One that reflects our fascination with the afterlife, our hunger for cosmic order, our talent for creating wonder and staining it with violence. The Temple of the Feathered Serpent reminds us, greatness casts long shadows. Civilizations soar, but they also bury things under stone. Secrets, sacrifices, sometimes the truth itself. Before we spoke with words, we spoke with rhythm. Long before language, before writing, before anyone put a name to a god or a season, there was the beat. A hand slapping wood, a foot stomping earth, a stick tapping stone. These were the first expressions of feeling. Not speech, but something primal, something felt. This is where the drum was born, not a musical instrument at first, but a heartbeat made audible, a pulse you could share with others across distance, across silence, across time. Some of the oldest drums date back more than 30,000 years. Made from hollowed trees, dried gourds, stretched animal hides. They didn't survive, but their presence echoes in burial sites and cave acoustics. These weren't toys, they were lifelines. Early humans used rhythm to warn, to gather, to celebrate, to grieve. One beat across a valley could mean danger, another could mark a birth. The drum wasn't just an object, it was the body's voice turned outward. A sacred signal. There were no spectators, no concert halls, no sheet music. Everyone participated, around fires, under stars, inside dark caves where sound became air. Rhythm became the shared language, one not spoken, but felt. Even when people had no words, they had rhythm. And in those beats they found belonging. Across the world, every culture, every tribe, whether in rainforests or deserts, frozen tundras or tropical islands, made something to strike, something to play, something to feel together. Because the drum wasn't just music, it was memory, ceremony, identity. In Africa, the djembe drum was carved from a single tree stretched with goat skin and believed to hold three spirits: the tree, the goat, and the maker. Played in circles, the djembe didn't accompany ritual, it was the ritual. In West Africa, talking drums mimicked speech. They sent news, births, deaths, warnings across miles. Before there were phones, there were rhythms riding the wind. Among Native American tribes, the drum was the heartbeat of the earth. Played in powwows, healing ceremonies, and spiritual rituals, it wasn't just sound, it was prayer. The large communal drum echoed through bodies, syncing heartbeats and intentions. In Australia, Aboriginal people used clapsticks and stomps during dreamtime stories, ancient myths of creation. In the Arctic, Inuit shamans struck hide drums to open windows to the spirit world in the midst of long, dark winters. These weren't concerts, these were survival. Drumming was healing, drumming was connection, drumming was a way to belong and to be remembered. From sacred ceremonies to bloody battlefields, the drum evolved into many things, and not all of them peaceful. As tribes became kingdoms and empires, the drum gained new jobs: war, command, control. In ancient China, towering war drums coordinated troops across hills and rivers. One beat meant charge, another meant retreat. In Mesopotamia, temple drums called crowds to worship or warned of siege. Rome marched to horns, but cults and rituals used the tympanum, a frame drum, to invoke gods and summon attention. But no one used drums like the Ottomans. Their Mater bands were full-blown military orchestras, rows of pounding kettle drums, shrieking cymbals, echoing horns. They didn't just announce war, they shook the air before a single sword was drawn. European enemies described panic setting in before they even saw the Ottoman army, just from the sound. Back home in royal courts across the globe, drums meant power. They marked royal entrances, proclaimed births, underscored authority. When you heard the drum, someone important was coming, or someone was about to suffer. Even enslaved people in the Americas used drums to resist. Forbidden to speak in native tongues, they turned to rhythm, codes, songs. Beats passed down, disguised, repurposed. Sometimes to mourn, sometimes to plan escape. Drums weren't just instruments, they were weapons of war, of memory, of survival. As civilizations spread and diverged, so did rhythm. East and West developed different philosophies, but both clung tightly to the drum. In India, rhythm became its own language. The tabla, small hand drums, didn't just keep time. They spoke. Each stroke had a syllable, a name. Indian percussion wasn't background noise, it was conversation. In Japan, the taiko drum boomed across mountains during Shinto rituals. Played with full-body discipline, taiko performances felt like spiritual duels. Rhythm as energy, movement, power. Every beat aimed at the sky. In Indonesia, the kendang drum led gamelan orchestras, hypnotic layers of sound woven into temple rituals. Here, rhythm reflected the cosmos, interlocking, pulsing, divine. Meanwhile, in medieval Europe, drums were mostly used to keep soldiers in line and time parades. Not sacred, not expressive, just useful. Not until the Renaissance did Western drums enter music. Still subdued, still second fiddle. That tells you everything about the difference. In the East, rhythm was divine breath. In the West, it was military math. But both knew the drum controls the moment. It leads, it warns, it gathers, it remembers. From jungle fires to mountain temples to underground tombs, the drum has always lived wherever people seek meaning. In Africa's Yoruba traditions, the bata drums spoke to the orishas, gods and spirits. Each rhythm was a prayer. Each beat had purpose. The drummers weren't performers. They were spiritual translators. In Hindu mythology, Shiva, the cosmic dancer, holds a tiny drum called the Damaru. Its beat marks the cycle of creation and destruction, the breath of the universe itself. The drum is the first voice we ever gave ourselves, the heartbeat we made audible, the rhythm that said, "I am here, I feel this, come listen." So whether echoing inside a stone temple, watched over by serpents, or played beneath stars by the first hands to know rhythm, the beat continues, and we still follow it. So you've survived your first shift in ancient Egypt, sunburned, sand-flavored, and spiritually overcommitted. Congratulations, you've earned the right to go home, pass out, and maybe scream into a woven reed pillow for a few hours. But first, you have to survive your household, a loose term that includes your family, your animals, your bugs, and whatever's currently nesting in the corner. Let's talk pets. Yes, the Egyptians loved animals. Cats weren't just tolerated, they were worshipped. Bastet, the goddess of protection, had a cat head and a zero-tolerance policy for anyone who mistreated her furry subjects. If a cat died in your house, you didn't just shrug and get another one. You shaved your eyebrows in mourning. Let that sink in. So your cat, untouchable, it does whatever it wants. Jumps on the food? Fine. Steals the fish? That's tribute. Bites your kid? Probably justified. But cats weren't the only domestic drama. You also had ibises, those birds with the long, judgmental faces, monkeys, tiny thieves, and crocodiles. Don't ask. Some people were into that. Dogs were loyal, but they weren't the only bark in town. You could have baboons. Actual baboons, with teeth and moods, and if it flung something at your neighbor, you were the one explaining that to the gods. Now throw in your day-to-day pests, flies, fleas, scorpions, cobras, mice and beetles, the size of coins that seem to exist purely to crunch under your feet in the dark. Ancient Egyptian homes had a lot of holes. Bugs got in, rats got cozy, and snakes slithered where they pleased. If your house didn't have at least one creature hiding behind a jar, was it even worth calling home? Night falls and you're ready to collapse, but sleep isn't guaranteed. You lie on a mat that smells like last week's onions and pray for a breeze. It won't come. Instead, you get noises. Constant, confusing ones. Something is clicking. Something else is hissing. And that shadow near the door? Let's just hope it's your cousin and not a sacred scarab with identity issues. Still you close your eyes, you dream of cool water and clean feet. Then your cousin rolls over and elbows you in the spleen. Because guess what? you're not sleeping alone. Multi-generational homes meant you, your parents, your siblings, and sometimes your goat all shared the same cramped room. No secrets, no personal space, just snoring, sneezing, scratching, and swatting, all in glorious harmony. Also, let's clear up one thing. Ancient Egypt was not quiet. This isn't some romantic moonlit scene with gentle harp music. You've got distant chanting from a temple, a drunk neighbor trying to argue with his goat, a chorus of dogs losing their minds, and that one guy who coughs like he's about to resurrect a mummy. And the plagues? Oh yes. Sometimes it rained frogs, or locusts, or your well-turned weird colors. No one blinked. This was just another Thursday. You'd offer a prayer, maybe burn some incense, and hope the gods weren't mad at you specifically. Still, for all the discomfort, noise, and ankle-biting vermin, there's something oddly beautiful about it all. These homes weren't castles, but they held laughter, stories, music, and dreams, even if the cat knocked those dreams off the table at 3 a.m. By now, you've worked, washed, worshipped, and possibly been bitten by something that hums in the dark. But don't worry. Ancient Egypt isn't all sand rash and public dehydration. Sometimes there's a festival, which sounds fun, right? Until you realize you're still working, just now you're doing it in front of a crowd, covered in oil, wearing a necklace made of onions. Festivals in Egypt were a huge deal. They were basically religious Super Bowls mixed with parades, parties, and a sprinkle of divine intimidation. These weren't just local block parties. These were state-sponsored, full-volume cosmic thank you cards to the gods, and everyone participated, even if you didn't want to. Let's say it's the Festival of Hathor. You'd better have your best linen on, freshly beaten against river rocks and still a little damp. People paint their eyes green with malachite, don flower garlands, and sing very loudly. Drums pound, sistrums shake. Cows, yes, actual cows, get paraded through the streets with fancy headdresses because Hathor is both a goddess and a cow, and no one's risking bad milk karma. Your job? Either march, chant, play music, pass out beer, or haul one of the heavy statues from the temple on your shoulders while trying not to sneeze in front of it. That statue, it's not just a block of stone, it's a god, thank you very much. And if you trip and drop it, you've cursed your entire bloodline and possibly several adjacent goats. Also, the crowds, thousands of sweaty, shouting, spiritually overexcited people crammed together under an angry sun, all trying to touch the divine or at least not pass out. There's dancing, clapping, ritual wailing, awkward eye contact with priests, and that one guy who always drinks too much date beer and starts yelling at a sacred ibis. Oh yes, and the food. Finally, a break. Tables, okay, mats, are laid out with baskets of bread, jars of beer, figs, dates, grilled fish, and if you're lucky, some roast duck, assuming the temple kitchen didn't hoard it all. But don't expect to sit. You eat while standing, dodging elbows and swatting flies the size of kittens. Still, it's a rare moment of abundance. People are laughing, eating with both hands, and pretending the last 3 months of back-breaking labor were just part of the divine journey. If you're a kid during the festival, it's the best day ever. You get sweets made of honey and sesame, watch dances in gold fringe, and maybe even catch a puppet show about the gods yelling at each other. If you're an adult, you're just trying not to drop anything or offend anyone cosmic. And when the sun finally sets and the statues go back to their shrines, the party shifts. Torches are lit, the music gets louder, some people keep dancing, others sneak off to pray privately behind temple walls. The line between sacred and rowdy gets blurry. Eventually you stumble home, sandal broken, robe stained, ears ringing, and the vague sense that maybe you yelled something embarrassing at a passing priest. But hey, that was celebration. You honored the gods, you didn't get trampled by the holy cow, and you ate something that didn't contain pebbles. Welcome to the sweat-stained world of ancient Egyptian fashion and hygiene, where looking good was mandatory, smelling okay was optional, and footwear was basically a rumor. First up, the clothes. If you're imagining flowing, white, breezy elegance, you're not entirely wrong, but remember, linen was all they had. Cotton? Doesn't exist here yet. Wool? Considered unclean. Leather? Reserved for shoes, elites, and occasionally war. So it's linen or nothing, sometimes literally nothing, depending on age and temperature. Men typically wore short kilts or wraparound skirts, while women had long dresses held up by shoulder straps and an eternal sense of heat exhaustion. Children? Often didn't bother with clothes at all until puberty, which honestly makes sense. Who wants to fight a sandstorm with a diaper? But here's the catch. Even though it's 112 degrees and you've been hauling bricks since sunrise, you're still expected to look good. That means washing your garments in the Nile with rocks, starching them, yes, they used plant-based starch, and sometimes perfuming them by storing them near incense. Jewelry was a big deal. If you didn't own some, you made it. Beads, shells, glass, copper, faience, whatever you could afford. Necklaces, amulets, anklets, rings. Not wearing at least one shiny thing was like walking around today without a phone. People stared. Makeup. Mandatory. Both men and women wore it, and not subtly. Heavy eyeliner made from galena, a form of lead, framed every eye, not just for beauty, but because it was believed to protect against the sun and ward off evil spirit. Green eye shadow made from crushed malachite completed the look. Add to that a touch of red ochre to the cheeks and lips and boom, ready for your public grain ration appearance. Now let's talk scent, or the constant, low-level war against body odor. You're working in the heat. You're bathing in the same river as livestock. You're eating onions and fermented beer mash. You smell like a burnt goat inside another burnt goat. So what do? You improvise. You smear scented oils onto your skin, made from myrrh, cinnamon, or lotus. If you're rich, you wear perfume cones, waxy blobs of fragrant fat placed on top of your head that slowly melt down your hair over time. Romantic? Maybe. Practical? Only if you enjoy dripping in public like a scented candle with self-esteem issues. And hair? Also a battlefield. Most men shaved their heads or kept their hair short. Lice were a constant threat, and nothing ruins a pharaoh chic vibe like scratching your scalp with a broken reed. Women often braided their hair, and wigs were everywhere. Wigs of braided human hair, wool, or even palm fiber. Some wore them to impress. Others wore them because lice had already won. Don't forget your feet. You could wear sandals if you were wealthy or lucky enough to own them. But most people went barefoot. Through sand, through mud, through festivals. Through places where large animals had strong opinions and weak bowels. So yes, ancient Egyptians had style, they had swagger. They walked like they owned the place, probably because their sandals burned off hours ago and they had no choice but to strut. But elegance came at a price. You were hot. You were sticky. Your eyeliner ran. Your tunic clung. And sometimes a perfume cone dripped down your neck while you were trying to flirt with the baker's daughter. Still, compared to most ancient civilizations, Egypt was a runway. They cared, they posed, they glittered. And for a culture constantly flirting with the divine, looking good wasn't vanity, it was spiritual hygiene. So you've made it through the sun, the sweat, the sarcophagus prep, and 1,000 gods judging your breakfast. But there's one thing we haven't touched yet. Love. That's right. Even in a society with snake gods and sand in your underarms, people still manage to flirt, fall in love, and yes, ruin their lives like champions. Let's start with the ancient Egyptian dating scene. Spoiler: there were no apps. No swipe right if you also worship Ras. Relationships happened the old-fashioned way, through festivals, neighbor gossip, cousin setups, or spotting someone while carrying laundry down to the Nile and thinking, wow, the way they slap that tunic against a rock, that's marriage material. And you didn't have to be royalty to feel romance. Love poetry survives in tombs and scrolls, some of it downright mushy. Lines like, "My heart flutters when I see you like a fish caught in a net," or "Your voice is more intoxicating than beer," were basically the Netflix and chill of the New Kingdom. The pickup lines? Mostly compliments. "Your eyes are like the stars of Nut." "Your hair flows like black river reeds." Or if you were really bold, "Your breath is like sweet onions." Which back then was not an insult. Onions were prized. They showed up in meals, medicine, offerings, and romantic comparisons. So yes, if someone told you that you smelled like a garden of leeks, you blushed. Now let's say you're married. First of all, congrats. You survived the mating rituals, and you probably own at least one bed that doesn't wobble every time the wind blows. Ancient Egyptian marriage wasn't about ceremonies, no big weddings, no temple vows, no awkward uncles yelling during speeches. You simply moved in together and told people, "This is my wife, this is my husband." And boom, you were hitched. But marriage didn't mean peace. Your days were still full of grain grinding, goat chasing, and praying you didn't die from fish guts. Husbands were expected to provide food and shelter. Wives handled household management, child-rearing, weaving, finances, and occasionally yelling at their husbands for coming home late from the beer stall smelling like barley and bad choices. But here's the kicker: divorce was totally legal. If things didn't work out, you could end it. No shame, no excommunication, just pack your amulets and go. Property was divided, kids stayed with the mom unless otherwise agreed, and everyone moved on, often right into another relationship with someone equally exhausted. And women had rights, real ones. They could initiate divorce, sue their ex, keep property, and raise their kids independently. They were strong, loud, legally literate, and tired. Always tired. Of course, cheating wasn't encouraged, but it happened. If caught, a man might face a fine, a woman, possibly public shaming or divine judgment, depending on who she cheated with. Sleep with a commoner, scandal. Sleep with a priest, scandal with extra curses. Sleep with someone sacred, like a member of the royal house, and you're practically applying for early mummification. And if you were really unlucky, your love life could land you in a poem where everyone remembers you as that person who made bad decisions under the moonlight. But for all the risk, love in ancient Egypt was real. People wrote it, sang it, painted it. Couples were buried together. Family life was celebrated. And even if you spent your entire marriage arguing over how much beer was too much beer, you still went through life and into the afterlife, side by side, with matching eyeliner. So you've been sunburned, spiritually interrogated, romantically complimented with onion metaphors, and bitten by a mosquito the size of a falcon. You might be wondering, did ancient Egyptians ever have fun? Absolutely, but fun in ancient Egypt came with a side of bruises, public embarrassment, and occasionally being hit with a lute. Let's start with music, the soundtrack of the civilization. Egyptians didn't just tolerate music, they needed it. It played during work, rituals, festivals, parties, and funerals. Everyone had an instrument: hand drums, lutes, harps, clappers, flutes, rattles made of animal parts. If it made a sound and didn't catch fire in the sun, someone shook it at a god. Women often led musical performances, especially in temples. Some became chantresses, spiritual rock stars who sang praises to gods, played sistrums, metal rattle thingies, and probably had incredible arm muscles from shaking those things for hours. Then there was dancing, which ranged from sacred temple rituals to backyard flailing after too much beer. Dancers performed acrobatic moves that would make your modern yoga teacher weep. Tomb paintings show backbends, one-legged spins, and something that looks suspiciously like twerking 3,000 years early. And yes, there were drinking parties. Think ancient karaoke nights, but louder and with more livestock nearby. Beer flowed freely, and so did awkward flirting, heated debates, and that one guy who tried to recite poetry and fell into a cooking fire. Speaking of beer, games, the most famous was Senet, the world's oldest known board game, part strategy, part chance, and completely rage-inducing when your opponent blocks your move, and you have to spend the next 10 turns pretending not to curse them under your breath. Tombs even show pharaohs playing Senet in the afterlife, because apparently eternal peace still involved trying to win one last round against your uncle. There were also physical games, wrestling, tug-of-war, balancing acts, most of which ended in bruises, sprained dignity, or some poor scribe getting accidentally thrown into a fruit cart. Now, if you were rich, your entertainment included servants performing tricks, trained baboons, yes, again, and possibly listening to a professional storyteller spin tales of gods, kings, or how that one guy tripped over a donkey and accidentally married a priestess. But the real entertainment was watching other people make mistakes. Imagine your neighbor slipping into a water jar trying to catch a frog, or that one cousin who insisted he could carry 4 jugs on his head, then face-planted into the goat pen. Ancient Egyptians loved a good accident. There were even stories written for laughs, like the satirical letter, which is just 900 words of someone roasting another guy's handwriting, outfit, and general existence. And if things got too serious, you'd call in a professional fool. Yes, that was a job. These entertainers juggled, told jokes, did impressions, and probably got paid in onions and applause. A good fool could diffuse tensions, distract from a bad harvest, or cheer up a grieving family. A bad one? Well, hopefully, they were also a farmer. Even pets provided comic relief. Monkeys stole jewelry. Cats knocked over offering bowls. Geese chased children. Life was hard, but the moments of joy. They were loud, chaotic, and usually involved someone trying to impress a crush and accidentally lighting their hair oil on fire. Because when your workday ends in blisters, your afterlife requires a resume, and your gods are watching your every move. Sometimes you just need to dance like nobody's recording it in hieroglyphs. So let's say you've accepted your reality. Life is hot, bread is crunchy for the wrong reasons, and your cat might have more legal protection than you. Still, you've got ambition. You want something better. You want to rise above the mud, to escape endless labor, to hold a pen instead of a shovel. But to get there, you had to survive scribe school, which was less Hogwarts, more boot camp with homework. Students began training around age 6 or 7, usually boys from families with means or connections. You'd show up at school, likely in a temple or a small mud brick classroom, with a palette, reed pens, and a plank of wood to write on. Desks, hilarious. Chairs, not a chance. You sat cross-legged on the floor and hoped your knees didn't fuse by lunch. Your first lesson? Copy. Then copy again. Then do it 400 more times. Every hieroglyph, every phrase, until your hand cramped and your reed pen frayed. Mistakes weren't erased. they were mocked. There are ancient letters from teachers to students that basically read, "You write like a frog with a broken foot." If your handwriting improved, you moved up to longer texts, legal contracts, tax records, religious hymns, love poetry. You memorized spells, royal decrees, shipping manifests. Education in Egypt was 5% inspiration, 95% repetition, and 110% papyrus splinters. And don't think you were safe from punishment. There are writings that literally say, "A student's ears are on his back. He listens when he is beaten." That's a poetic way of saying, pay attention or get whacked with a stick. But if you survived, you made it to the good life. Scribes didn't farm, scribes didn't dig canals. Scribes got to sit in the shade with ink-stained fingers, recording the daily grind of other people's lives. They became administrators, tax collectors, advisors, priests, even engineers. And oh, the power! Scribes controlled records. That meant taxes, food storage, census counts, temple inventories, even spells. If your name was misspelled in the afterlife paperwork, guess what? You're wandering eternity trying to convince Osiris that Thutmose with one S is still you. But scribes didn't just serve pharaohs, they served the cosmos. Writing wasn't decoration, it was divine function. In hieroglyphs, to name something was to give it power, to write it was to make it eternal. Women, unfortunately, rarely got the chance. A few elite women became literate, especially in priesthood or royalty, but most had to express brilliance in other ways, like running estates, negotiating marriages, or raising 9 children while weaving linen with one hand and baking bread with the other. Still, everyone respected scribes, even laborers, even nobles. Because when the harvest was counted, or a will was written, or someone needed to document how many oxen wandered into someone else's courtyard, it was the scribe who made it real. So yes, you could rise. If you had brains, discipline, and enough patience to copy "Ra is great" 900 times without setting your tablet on fire. And even though your friends were out there wrestling goats, you had something better: ink, language, legacy. Plus, let's be honest, nobody wants to die from a chisel injury on pyramid duty when you could die from a papyrus paper cut in the shade instead. You've worked, worshipped, wed, washed, and wobbled through scribe school. You've danced until your sandals caught fire and sung praises to a crocodile god in the hope your laundry dries faster. But eventually, whether by accident, ambition, or pure neighbor drama, you get in trouble. Welcome to ancient Egyptian justice, where law and order was part religion, part bureaucracy, and part, what does this guy look guilty of? Let's say your neighbor accuses you of stealing his goat. You didn't. You borrowed it, temporarily, with intent to return. Probably. Doesn't matter. You're now involved in a legal proceeding, and you'd better bring more than excuses. First, you go to your local village council, a group of elders who meet in public under the burning sun and decide justice while swatting flies and chewing on dried dates. Evidence? Testimony? Sure, but also gossip, character reputation, and how close you live to the temple. It's like Judge Judy meets the Hunger Games. If the case is serious, like land disputes, adultery, or messing with the pharaoh's stuff, and it goes higher, temple courts, or even the vizier. That's right, the second in command to the king might be hearing your complaint that your cousin keeps borrowing your beer jars and never returns them full. And the punishments? Let's just say they believed in consequences with flair. Stole something minor, you might get fined, whipped, or publicly humiliated. Carve your name where it doesn't belong? Same. You could get the offending hand cut off, or your nose flattened. Seriously, oh, there are drawings. And if you tried to fake a will or lie to a priest, you didn't just offend the law, you offended Ma, the goddess of truth and cosmic order. Now you've got a spiritual problem. Some crimes were settled by trial by ordeal. That's right. Physical tests where guilt was supposedly revealed by divine outcome, like being forced to swim across a canal infested with crocodiles. If you made it, clearly the gods favored you. If you didn't, well, good effort. And yes, people went to prison, but Egyptian prisons weren't built for long-term rehab. They were holding pens for people awaiting trial, punishment, or a very intense lecture from a deity. Imagine a dark, airless room full of accused goat thieves, corrupt scribes, and that guy who sneezed during a sacred festival. And don't think the wealthy always got off easy. Pharaohs could be merciless. Treason, disloyalty, or even minor disrespect could land you face down in a pit, surrounded by curses and jackal-headed judgment. If you were caught plotting, expect your name and face to be erased from history. The worst punishment imaginable, worse than death. It meant your soul never existed, so you kept your hands clean, your goats accounted for, your amulets charged, because in ancient Egypt the law didn't care how tired you were, or how sunburned, or how often your cousin lied about who broke the pot. Justice watched everything. And if the gods didn't see it, the neighbor kid definitely did, and he's already told his uncle who knows a priest. The sun is setting over the Nile. It bleeds gold and orange into the river like the gods spilled their paint jar. Papyrus rustles in the breeze. A heron takes off in slow motion, like it's starring in a dramatic finale you didn't ask for. You've survived an entire day in ancient Egypt, somehow still upright, mostly conscious, and only partially cursed. You made it through the heat, the work, the rituals, the cat-related injuries, and the fermented soup they call beer. Your skin's 3 shades darker, your hair smells like river mud, and you're still pulling sand out of places you're not emotionally ready to discuss. Congratulations, you've earned a break. Too bad you're not getting one. Because now, it's nightfall. And in ancient Egypt, nighttime isn't peaceful, it's a cosmic battleground. The sun god Ra doesn't just clock out and go home. Oh no, every single night he gets on a giant solar boat and sails through the underworld, fighting off Apophis, the chaos serpent who tries to eat the sun before morning. So while you're trying to sleep on a mat that smells like warm onions, the fate of the universe is being decided in celestial boat combat. You've done everything right today. You bathed in frog water. You praised the sun. You didn't insult any jackal-headed gods out loud. You made offerings. You worked till your sandals gave up and your soul tried to exit your body through a sweat gland. You even sat through a full lecture on crop taxation delivered by a man with 3 teeth and very strong opinions about granaries. And now, as the stars blink to life overhead and temple chants echo faintly through the night air, you stare up at the sky and realize one thing with crystal clarity. You're soft. You miss cold water. You miss cushions. You miss coffee, sunscreen, real shoes, and the ability to use the bathroom without first checking for snakes. You thought you could handle a day in ancient Egypt. But now you understand this wasn't a day, this was a lifetime compressed into 14 hours and 3 heat-induced hallucinations. And yet somehow the people who lived this life, they thrived. They raised families, built monuments, crafted art that still takes our breath away. They mapped the stars, balanced the books, mummified their dead, and developed a civilization that lasted longer than most modern countries have existed. They didn't just survive the heat, they worshipped it. They turned sand into legacy, stone into scripture. You You passed out in a public square after drinking too much barley water and accidentally yelled "Ra is overrated" in front of a priest. Because you don't need to survive ancient Egypt. You just need to remember it, laugh at it, learn from it, stand in awe of it. These people lived full, bright, astonishingly difficult lives, and somehow found time to invent eyeliner, toothbrushes, and poetry about ducks. So when your air conditioner breaks, or your Wi-Fi drops out, or you step on a Lego and think, "This is the worst pain in human history," remember, someone in 2400 BC had sand in their kidneys, a boss who thought he was a god, and the looming threat of spontaneous snake bites. You are still here, my friend? I can't believe it. This didn't help you fall asleep? Well, I will try harder in the next one to achieve that. You deserve a gold star. You are a trooper. Type gold star in the comments below, and we'll know you made it to the end. I'm sure not many did. Good night, my friend, and thanks again for tuning in.